So now let's look at modifying images in a function. And I have code for that. You may have seen this before. And so we want to see what's going to happen when you modify an image inside of a Python function. And so we have redFilt, which is just a red filter. In fact, I'm just going to call it redFilter, but it's just a version of redFilt, or redFilter called redFilt. It takes a single image as a parameter. It loops through all the pixels. It grabs the pixel. It keeps the red component and assigns it back to the original image that's in the parameter. I think we actually did this one yesterday. So this is literally the same thing as the red filter. And at the top level here, we have the red tuple and the yellow tuple, and we have global image again. So if we save and run this, or just run it this time, we can look at global image, and it's red, yellow, red, and then yellow, red, yellow. So exactly what it says here. And now if we call redFilt on this, notice it doesn't return anything, right? There's no return in here, so nothing printed out. So we have to look at globe image again. And you notice that globe image is red, 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 red. It's red everywhere. And that's because we only kept a red component, and yellow has a red component of 255. It's red everywhere. So I want to move this code here into here. And then I want to grab this whole thing. Whoops. So that's the code we just worked with, right? So we have a function, and I want to see what happens in Python's memory. Now, because we have a function, we have to be more careful with memory. When we were doing the first one, we didn't care so much because everything was global. But now we have globals, and we have a function which uses the stack frame. So we just need to be more careful here. And so let's start with our globals. Remember, we get a table that holds all the globals. And what are our globals? Well, we have R, Y, and globe image. We have R, we have Y, we have globe image. And R is going to be the red, and Y is going to be the yellow. But what is globe image going to be? Well, globe image is just a reference. To a list that it itself is a reference to two lists of 3 values each. So here's that and that. And remember, this one was red. In those places, I kind of wish I'd done it in black now, not red, but let me redraw this. I don't like mixing all these colors. So let's redraw globe image. There's red, and there's red, and then there's yellow, yellow, yellow. So that's what globals look like right up to this point here. We haven't called red filt yet. We've just done the globals. And then we're going to call red filt. And when we call a function, so we're calling a function, we're passing global image. We're calling a function. Remember, we have to go to what's called the stack. And on the stack, we're going to get a stack frame. For red filt, right? We create a stack frame because we're inside of a function. And what is in this function? Well, it takes img as a parameter. So img. And what is img? img is a reference to that list. Remember, we passed globe image. It's a reference to the list. Also in red filt, we have R and we have C. And initially, they're both going to start at 0, right? So eventually, we're going to hit those two things. I'm not going to go through, right? But notice that we have two R's in here. We have this R and we have this R. One R is in globals and one R is in red filt. And in red filt, it's an index to a list. And at the top level in the globals, it's a color. But notice that we're in red filt, and so we can't see R the color, only R the index. I'm not going to go through the details of how R and C loop through this. I want to look instead at this, pix, new pix, image. So pix is going to go on our stack frame. And what is pix? Pix is equal to image RC. At RC00, pix is actually that element right there, right? The variable pix is a reference to the first pixel, and then the loops, and then it's a variable to the next pixel, and then it loops, and the next pixel, and then the next pixel, et cetera, et cetera. But initially, it's a reference to the first pixel. But I'm going to get rid of that line because it's getting in the way. I didn't leave enough room. There's one more variable here. That one more variable is called new pix, which is a new red tuple. Or possibly it's a new tuple. Oops. Remember, that goes right there. New pix is going to be the red component of pix. Right. And so when we do this new pix here, it's going to be the red component of whatever's in pix, which means it's going to be red all the time. And it's not really going to change. It's going to get a new red every single time. I'm not really going to draw it because it's going to change over and over. But the really important thing is happening is right here. What's happening here is that we're actually modifying this image at row R in column C. We're updating the image. And what that's going to do is that this is going to modify this image directly. Because that's what IMG refers to. And so what's going to happen here is that it's going to change, it's actually going to change every single element but the reality is it's going to make them all red because they all have red components, right? It's going to convert. We're only keeping the red components, and R and Y are both made up of all red components on the red, in the red section, right? That's all red. So it's going to turn all of those into red components. So it's converting all the yellows to red. And then we finished function call. And there's no return statement. So what really happens here after this loop finishes is that it returns with the special value of none, which is nothing. This is why it doesn't actually do anything. But what happens when we return? What happens when this returns? This entire stack frame gets deleted. I'm not a fan of deleting things. So let me put them all back if I can. Wow. That's good enough. And so what's going to happen is that this is going away. I'm just throwing it over here so that you knew it existed, but it's no longer in the picture. There's nothing else referencing this image thing now except global image. So the stack frame disappears. And now we're here, right? This is where we're at. We just called red filter ends. We're back at the top level. And the only thing left is the globals. There's no more stack frame for red filter. R and C, picks and new picks are all gone. And so what we're left is what's in the global table. And we're able to look up and see the global image. And what are we going to see? And unfortunately, when I did that, all that backtracking, these turned color on me. Remember, we changed all these to red and red filter. So what are we going to see is a list of lists that contain all red. Because of inside red filter, we modified this image here because we had the reference. This globe image is passed as a reference to red filter, and we modify the image. And even though we were doing it through a parameter called image, which is different than this variable called global image, but we were doing it because it was a reference to the same exact list of lists as the global image. And that's how red filter was able to modify the global image through the parameter called image. Questions on that one? I know it's quite a bit, but that's essentially what's happening when we call a function and we pass an existing reference as a parameter, and then we modify it. We're changing the original because a reference is just copied over.